And now, a workshop of the McAllen City Commission. All workshops are open to the public in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. These workshops allow for detailed staff presentations.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin with item number 1. Any questions to staff related to today's regular agenda? Anybody have any questions?
No questions, Mayor Pro Tem.
No questions.
Good, I'm good.
And we'll move on to item number 2, budget wrap-up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the commission. At last week's budget meeting, it was suggested that we consider bringing the budget wrap-up for today. We appreciate that. We think it's a great idea and it makes us a little more efficient. This is really a very fast review, and what the budget recap attempts to do is to discuss issues that came up during the process, especially changes that we made coming from the City Commission for the most part. Some were up, some were down, and so on. So we're going to go through these few pages rather quickly. I'm sure that you'll remember this discussion and suggestions, and then if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them. So on page number 1, this is the general fund wrap-up. As we showed you at the beginning of the budget session, we are beginning a fund balance of an estimated $87,650,424. Proposed total revenues of $169,526,618. Those are the figures you saw in the first meeting. Since then, we, as I discussed with you in the first meeting, we get the tax roll the week immediately prior to our budget workshops. So we're using an estimate up until that time. Once we receive the tax roll, we calculated that there's an actual reduction of our estimate of $456,421. And that's the official tax roll from the Hidalgo County Appraisal District, bringing us a total revised total resources of $256,720,620 for the general fund. Okay, so during the discussions, it was agreed to increase the IT department by $60,000 for the city main website redesign, and the City Commission agreed with that. We also awarded the EMS contract for next year while we were going through the budget process, and that resulted in a net savings compared to what we're doing now of $600,000 per year. The next item is the Training Academy laptops that the City Commission approved. That's $6,300. Quita Mazatlan repaving, we didn't have a lot of discussion on that. However, that work has already been completed, so we don't need the $53,258. And then in the general fund, the City Commission at the last meeting made adjustments to the outside agencies, totaling $139,000 increase. Any questions on that?
All good. No, sir.
Okay. With that, the total decrease compared to our initial expenditure versus revenue is a decrease of $447,958 in expenditures. Okay, so that means that the revenue over expense estimated for the general fund is $6,755,634, with the revised fund balance projected for September the 30th of 2025 of $94,406,058. Okay, now of interest at the bottom, it would just give you for perspective. 1 day of operating, working capital is $406,000, 406,136. So that gives you an estimated 232 days of working capital. Now, one of the things that we talked about during budget, when it comes to the general fund is, that's a lot of money, right? So every other year, more or less, we have a discussion and the city management recommends that we transfer some of that money out for capital. We're gonna recommend you do that, not during this session, nor when you adopt the budget, but soon after, we should have a workshop, you should have a workshop, to have that discussion. And usually, we try to get that, days of working capital to 160. That's what you've done in the past, doesn't mean that's what you have to do this time. We're required to have 140. If you do that, if you go to 160, you would have an estimated $29 million for capital. And we've got a couple of projects that could handle that. And so, one in particular that we had in executive session a few weeks ago, that's that much more money that you don't have to account for in the future and/or borrow. So, again, that's just for you to think about. No action today, nor at the first budget meeting, next meeting. So, approximately $29 million of cash. The next page is the Development Corporation Fund. There was a few changes, not much. We projected a beginning fund balance of $25,609,115. Proposed total revenues of $25,308,879 for total resources of $50.9 million. The proposed total appropriation is $34,830,072. Again, a lot of that has to do with projects that we start that we don't finish, and therefore we've got to move forward to the next fiscal year. The three changes that were made during the budget workshops: number one, it was recommended that we reduce the airline incentives by $1 million. We talked about how we've already budgeted for all of the airlines that are in our airport now. We're at capacity, so the possibility that you would need that money this fiscal year is pretty low. Doesn't mean you can't, amend your budget in the future if you want to, but we just felt that that number is bigger than it needed to be, so we're reducing it by $1 million. City Commission agreed with that. And then during the Development Corporation meeting, the board actually recommended that we increase the expenditure for the golf course by $500,000 for erosion control. That's a project that we've been doing now for a couple of years. This is phase 2, and so that $500,000 represents that. And then there was an agency adjustment at our last meeting for $100,000 that the commission requested, and that was specifically for VIDA.
And the golf course was, the revenues coming out of the golf course is justifying some of this expense that we're putting.
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
they're doing very well,
They are.
and we'll recover that.
Yeah, it's the preferred municipal golf course in the valley. It's over 65,000 rounds. I don't know how they keep up with it, honestly.
Yeah, and within a few years, that investment will come.
Absolutely.
A large part of it will come back.
Yes, sir. So, that has a revised fund balance in the Development Corp of $16,487,922. Probably one of the bigger fund balances we've seen in a while. Any other question or comment? On the next page, page 3 is the Convention Center. There were some changes here. We had a projected beginning fund balance for October 1 of 24 of $10,271,093. Proposed total revenues of $9,174,430 for total resources of $19.4 million. Total appropriations of $12.368. And the two changes that were discussed during budget was to go ahead and do the floor of the, I went blank.
Convention Center.
Of the, what's the name of the room?
Exhibit Hall.
Exhibit Hall, and put a new epoxy floor, and that's the estimate for that, and then do some lighting replacement at the Convention Center for a total increase of $465,000 of expenses, brings you a fund balance of 6.6. Any questions?
Those are also bringing in additional revenues
Convention Center
to the convention center, doing well, and we'll recover most of that money within years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, the next page, page 4, is Anzalduas. There was one change, beginning fund balance 22.7. This is the construction fund. Proposed total revenue, that's actually money we already have. Total resources of $68 million. That's because it's already under construction. And that is something that you've already awarded, and that's the Anzalduas cargo furniture for CBP in the amount of $83,586. That's the only change we made there. And so we're recommending that be added. On page 5, I don't know that we had a lot of discussion about this, but we are making this recommendation. This is the parade fund. As you know, a few years ago, we created this fund so that the parade stands alone. And so we are recommending that we increase sponsorships, and that's based on discussions that the staff has already had, by 45 million. No, 45,000. Someday they want to have 45 million. 45,000, and then increase our expenses on floats by 30,000. So it's a net increase of revenue, net revenue of 15,000. And that is all the changes that we discussed during budget. Be glad to answer any questions if you have any. And if not, we can go to the next item, Mayor Pro Tem.
Any questions?
But just note that we had 5 budget meetings. This is just a little wrap-up of the 5 different meetings that we had, and then we'll still have a little time before we have to adopt the budget.
We'll have 2 public hearings in September. Today, we discussed the tax rate, and then 2 public hearings in September. Okay, item number 2 is a Vision Zero adoption plan presentation.
Mayor Pro Tem, Marlene, the traffic director, is going to be doing this presentation. She did the previous presentation. We'll let her do the follow-up today.
Good afternoon. If you will notice, there's a packet. This is the final document in its entirety, as well as another set of slides. This is an updated presentation. It's not what's in the packet. It's a little bit shorter. Just to go over, again, Vision Zero McAllen is a plan rooted in the belief that no loss of life or serious injury is acceptable on our transportation system. This plan is going to help us make the roadway safer for all users, motorcycles, bicyclists, pedestrians, as well as other roadway users, automobiles, things of that nature. And we have a website dedicated to this campaign. A little, or just a summary of the timeline. We brought this plan to a workshop back in February. Then we did a community outreach in March. We then proceeded to review the preliminary draft at the internally at the staff level, along with fire department, police department, metro, other departments, to allow them to provide input, some things that they might want to see or add. And then we had the public draft available for review. We posted it on our website in the month of July. That was available and up. We received comments for about 3 weeks. And then now I am before you in an effort to try to adopt the plan. Just some changes or additions to the final plan that are shown. We went ahead and added the resolution. It's also, the resolution will also be part of the regular meeting if there are no questions, and it looks good in its entirety. And also the table of contents was adjusted a little bit just to add a little bit more detail and break down the information that's in the plan. Community-wide survey, some of the information under the community-wide survey for the community outreach portion back in March was added. Some things that we found that would be helpful to have is some top concerns from the people, the residents or the people that were filling out these surveys, which is that people are concerned about people driving while impaired, people driving while texting or looking at the phone, people driving too fast, and drivers not stopping for people walking in the crosswalk. Some other items that are also included are the McAllen Vision Zero Task Force, which we hope to create and go ahead and evolve it through the Traffic Commission Board, as well as a Traffic Safety Interoperability Group, which will be more of an internal City of McAllen group where we will make sure that we are, in following the goals that are outlined in the plan. The task force will kind of keep us in check, make us accountable, and so that's how those two groups will work. The next set of additions or changes, in the previous workshop, or in the last workshop that I came before you, we had about a good 9 common types of FSA crashes. We had the consultant simplify them. Some will be by intersections and the others will be by corridor. So now you have a total of 6. This helps us a lot moving forward in how to plan, right? Some of the projects that hopefully in the future will come before you through workshop to discuss will be linked back to some of these intersection types. So they're broken down by, at the intersection, typically, people running red lights is common. Also, making a right turn and there's a bike lane, somebody might miss the biker, or the biker might not stop, keep going, the person turning right might not see them. And then the other one is making left turns. This is one that we see a lot in the downtown area that we want to try to come to the table with TxDOT, is making that left turn and the person crossing the street is not visible by the driver. Sometimes it's because of the frame of the vehicle. The next one is by corridor types. The people jaywalking is a common one. Another one is somebody driving, maybe looking at their phone or being distracted, kind of swerving off the road and possibly hitting somebody that's either trying to attempt to cross or also on their bike. And then the most common one that we see too under corridors is making those left turns. People thinking, making that risk, thinking that they're safe and the car's going a lot faster than they perceive, and the collision happens. And then lastly, under appendix documents, there's some documents that we wanted to make part of the plan, but we didn't want to make the plan longer. The original plan we had was 167 pages. When you're trying to educate the public about how McAllen's going to make roadways safer, 167 pages sounds like a lot of information to process. So we worked with a consultant to try to consolidate. The final draft that you see before you is 68 pages long, but we will have the appendix documents available on our website in case somebody wants to see the survey that was taken during the community outreach, as well as the Safe Streets for All checklist. This is important in becoming a Safe Streets for All, to get the certification for Safe Streets for All, and that will allow us to apply for grants with a Vision Zero goal, maybe sidewalks, maybe ways to improve schools, things of that nature. That concludes the changes and the Vision Zero itself, and we're hoping to present it to you for adoption through resolution. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Questions?
Just one thing that I see as a concern is, let's say a vehicle coming out of a business and they're having to scoot in between cars that are at a red light. Mm-hmm. So they go in between, and then there's traffic that they can't see coming the other way, and so they get hit, right? And so it's a problem that I see a lot of, and I don't know if there's mostly just education, I guess, on how to not take that risk, right? But I see a lot of that happening.
Yes. We'll make sure to include it under education. We do have a good amount of items that we would want to target, especially distracted driving, driving while impaired. Some of the things that you saw a little while ago with the concerns that the public had, but we'll make sure to add that.
Yeah, okay.
Many times in a development, especially of a certain size, the developers are asked and the engineers are asked to get a traffic study done. And they're done by, you know, experts, traffic safety engineers type groups. Are they getting this information that we've come up with? Or can we make sure that they do get, are you planning to do any type of professional to the local engineers and to the, about what we're seeing and why we're seeing it and why possibly they could use it in their studies and try to?
Yes, so we can definitely do that. The traffic department does have a say within, well, obviously through the traffic impact analysis review. And one of the things that we're always looking for is trying to consolidate driveways, trying to make sure that if there is a driveway that is needed, we consider a deceleration lane,
Yes.
Things like that. So we're always making sure we provide comments like this, and Vision Zero is going to help us fight more for what we've already known and what we already see.
Yeah, there's certain, I mean, there's not that many traffic engineering firms in our area, in Hidalgo County, but if you could get with them, there's probably a good, you know, 10 or so that could benefit from that, and it would expedite it better, and you know, that we're conscious about the same thing, okay, what we want. So,
We can definitely reach out.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, next item.
Next item is the terminal
Thank you.
capacity study presentation. And as you all know, Mayor and Commissioners, we had some workshops the last several months. Some of you made some of those, we appreciate that. And so this is the culmination of those workshops, and again, this is to give us the green light to move forward with the actual study and design of this potential expansion of the terminal.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commission. Before you, we have the terminal capacity team here. We have Casey Nowicki with SCH and Eric Peterson with Alliance. As Mr. Rodriguez mentioned, we did have the 3 workshops with our stakeholders, which included some of the commission, the city manager, and some of the city managers from his office, our airport advisory board, and the MEDC executive board, and the Chamber Executive Board. So thank you for guiding us to the direction that we're at here, presenting to the commission, the full commission. And so looking at some of the numbers through the first half of the year, going all the way through July numbers. In June, we broke an all-time record with over 105 total passengers. And in July, we broke that again with over 114,000 passengers. We're 23% year over year in activity. After having 4 of the last 5 years breaking the record for total activity. The airlines continue to invest in our airport. American Airlines has gone up to 9 times daily to DFW. And in fact, Delta just loaded on their schedule an additional frequency on Saturdays. So now every day we have 3 flights to Austin, and it's performing at a very high load factor. So with that being said, looking into the future and how much we invest in our airport is going to be critical, how much we want to grow it. If the airlines continue to invest in it, so we're looking for some direction on some of the recommendations that the team has brought with the terminal capacity study.
All right. Looking forward to sharing this update with everyone. We're going to go over just real briefly some of the activity forecasts. Jeremy mentioned the really positive growth that you guys have seen with the airline activity increases. We did include or complete activity forecasts as part of the study as one of the very first steps. We are also going to give an update on the expansion alternatives analysis that we've done and the recommendations, as well as an overview of the visioning work that we did over those 3 workshops. And then another, in addition to the terminal space needs that you have, we know that parking is a growing concern with limited parking space. So we'll share some of the preliminary alternatives for potential parking expansion. So as I mentioned, one of the first things that the project team did was to look at activity forecasts. You've seen some really positive growth over the last several years. We know, obviously, this year you have several new routes. They're all performing very well, and we expect, that capacity will remain or continue to increase next year. So you can see here on this chart that shows kind of the next 20 years where we expect to see the passenger activity growth. That red line in the middle is our adopted forecast kind of, in the middle, and then you can kind of picture it as a wedge. We're forecasting the top activity range as well as a low range. That low range still, far exceeds your available space. So even if, activity were to, for some reason, dip, you still do have insufficient terminal space, which Eric will talk about a little bit as well. This table here, I know the numbers are a little bit hard to read on the screen, but I believe you have it in your packet. Two of the kind of critical activity levels that we forecast when it comes to commercial passenger activity and operations is the operations, the number of times an aircraft is landing and taking off and the number of aircraft that are on the ground, but also the number of passengers. So they're correlated and related to each other, but we need to think of them independently. So the terminal study forecasts looked at the forecasted number of passengers at different planning activity levels. So what does that peak month look like, the peak day, what does the peak hour of the peak day look like, and all of those things go into the terminal space planning needs. And then we also look at it in terms of the aircraft. So you have smaller aircraft and larger aircraft, and if you've been following it all in the news, you might be hearing about the airlines moving towards larger aircraft, and that is definitely something that the airport is already experiencing with Delta and American, or United and American have already upgauged to larger aircraft, and we expect to see that continue into the future. So currently in 2024, on kind of that peak time period, you have 3 regional-sized aircraft on the ground and 4 narrow-body aircraft that are a little bit larger on the ground. But as you look into the future, by 2038, it's 100% narrow-body aircraft, as those regional aircraft within the airline industry are really going to be phasing out. So that size of aircraft will be changing, and then that impacts terminal needs as well. So I'll turn it over to Eric to talk a little bit about the expansion alternatives and the visioning.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here. So as Casey was indicating, while that early work was going on, the forecasting, et cetera, that was to enable us to process that for what you specifically need in your facility. So we took those forecasts and then used industry standards, best practices to essentially put together a program. So we could say, based on what you're seeing now, what you're seeing in 5 years, 10 years, how much ticketing area do you need? How many gates? And we could do a comparison to what you currently have. So what that looks like is we put together, and I'm not going to go through all of these right here, but several pages of all the different areas that you have within a terminal facility, and come up with basically a stoplight. Green light is you haven't reached 85% of your capacity yet in that area, so you're kind of okay for the next few years or so. Amber or yellow means that you've reached 85%, but you still have a little bit of capacity, but your window is narrowing. And red means you're already at your capacity, so you're probably already having problems. So zooming in, just to give you an example of that, here are a few of the spaces. I think this is, some of the primary ones. You can see that top line. Well, first I'll say this is where you're at in 2023. So that's your current state. And if you look at circulation, well, it says you're pretty good. You got room to move around between your various areas. But then, as you slide down into the ticket lobby, it's like, well, warning, you're starting to run out of space there. You're going to need something pretty soon. Go down further to passenger hold rooms, the gate hold. Well, it's saying you're already short, either in number of gates, but the other facet that Casey mentioned, that the aircraft types are changing. So even if it weren't just the sheer number of people, even if it weren't the number of aircraft, at any given time, a larger aircraft, a 737 coming in versus one of the Canadair or Embraer jets, you have 50% more people demand. And so now the gate holds themselves are too small for the aircraft coming in. Then you go forward, that passenger activity level, 2028. In this example, you're in the red on everything anticipated to be. So you're at a point right now, you've only got a small window to start addressing some of the things that'll be critical across the board.
If I can add, Mayor and Commission, if you see the areas there in the 2023, that was year ending 2023, and just wanted to remind you that in 2024, we're already up 23% year over year. So those yellows are probably red already. So that's the additional pinch that we keep feeling there in the terminal whenever we got heavy traffic.
Okay. I'm going to stand up. Hopefully you can still hear me. I'll try to project. Let me know if there's a problem, because we're going to start getting into some of the diagrams. So we take this data and we look at the various areas and first look at it from a big mega picture, like where can you even expand on the overall site. And there's previous master plan studies that had some suggestions, but there were some inherent issues relative to, for example, the control tower or other airfield aspects. So we looked through, came up with several different options, and then ultimately the group focused on this alternative 4, and I'll blow that up a little bit, which in addition to some expansions on the terminal proper suggests essentially an entirely new concourse off to the west and northwest while reusing and reconfiguring portions of the existing. So we'll go into significantly more detail in terms of what that really entails.
Let me just add something right there. Of course, the goal in this development and any kind of expansion that we do is to keep all the existing gates in operation, and so to hold existing service so we don't have to go back to the airlines to try to ask them, can you hold off on service for a couple of years while we build these gates over here? So that was the intent on that alternative 4.
Great. So this is the existing facility. I know not everybody reads plans here, but just for orientation, this is the front of the terminal, baggage claim. Ticketing is over here. This is the security checkpoint and the queuing, and then your gates out in this area. So primary areas that needed addressing: checkpoint, don't have any room for more lanes right now. Ticket hall, as we pointed out, you're going to need some additional space pretty soon. Baggage claim, likewise, looking at a loading dock and additional restrooms there. The concourse was kind of that big piece of all of this that comes along. And then if we zoom in and say, what does that look like? Now, this is not designed yet. This is highly conceptual, just trying to make sense of what that program implies. But this is how it could play out. This area, this is the area of the current checkpoint right now. And you've probably seen it a few times where the queue goes all the way out into the corridor out front. Not all the time, but frequently. There's not much space on the backside by the restrooms. All of a sudden you get out of there and there's a gate and there's restrooms and all of that and people exiting. It's kind of a congested area. So the notion here is that would be moved in a new area that's cleared out with more space. With that, you develop more purposeful queuing area so that you can absorb that without it feeling like a zoo. And improve the overall circulation and wayfinding when you do that. There's additional flexibility then to add additional gates in the future or to have redundancy. If a machine goes down, which slows up processing. And there's an opportunity, as long as you're having to rework all that area, you can invest in a stronger statement at that point. It's the front door to the terminal. It's also when people arrive coming off the gates and about to go to the bag claim. It's an important space. We're kind of calling it the terminal commons. But there's an opportunity there while you're doing this renovation to upgrade that and really create a welcoming feel in that area. You don't have to go there. You can keep it utilitarian, but this is a good opportunity if that was part of the goals. Mentioned the ticketing area. This is where the existing wall is, where this line. So it just moves straight west. There's ample space there to do that. restrooms in that area. And then additional airline ticket office and admin expansion. On the east side, in the bag claim, add additional restrooms there, and then additional bag claim devices in that area. While we're doing that, it's possible to, with the addition of those other restrooms, to open up that space there where it kind of necks down. You could get additional landside concessions, a cafe that complements the notion of a meet and greeter area pretty well. So then the big gesture here, of course, is the new concourse off to the west and northwest. There are the gates themselves. 4 new gates in this location suggested in a potential initial phase of this. And importantly, improved and expanded amenities. So you can gain additional concessions that are usable both for the existing concourse and the new, potential for a space for an airline club, additional restrooms, kid play area, those type of things. Details to be worked out, but the opportunity is there to do it at this point. Then back behind the ticketing area, that creates a space where you could create additional support space. It's relatively inexpensive space to build when you're in the area. Out on the existing concourse, then, there'd be some reconfiguration in terms of taking that old checkpoint area. Now that's additional gate space. So that functions better, as well as expanding on the west face of the stem right here to expand the gates there and reorganize, if you will, some of the gate lounges to gain additional space there.
When you say gate lounge, what are we talking about?
Gate lobby.
Where the passengers
Holding area.
wait for
Not
the,
the lounge
to
that I
board.
go to.
Yeah, not the lounge. That's in 2 weeks.
yeah.
Okay.
And how many of those? More? 4, 5
Well,
more?
there's 4 new ones in
4
this
new,
area, and the creation of a gate lounge here that you currently don't have. So we've got 5.
And one more baggage claim?
One more there, but we can also look at the sizing of that.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that currently we're out of space. Ticket counter space, we don't have any more ticket counter space. Our airline operating areas are to capacity. I mean, we've moved some of the airlines into spaces that we weren't going to put airlines in to house them. And, you know, baggage claim, anybody, because of the upgauge, a lot of the airlines, that baggage claim gets pretty tight in there when you're claiming bags. So those are, you know, some of the areas that we're looking at expanding, as well as the gates. Currently, if anybody's left at, you know, first thing in the morning, we got 6 aircraft at every gate. So every gate's, you know, there's an aircraft sleeping at it. And then we got a remote parked airplane as well. So that's currently the needs are 7 gates, and looking out, because FAA will only fund after the improvements are built 10 years out. And, you know, so that gets us to 10 gates. So that's the reason that we got 10 gates here on this
Okay.
layout.
That's to qualify for the 90-10 type of investment on their part, or what?
That's typically the match, the 10% match to the federal share.
Yeah, we, the city, 10, and the federal government 90.
Yes, sir.
And this conforms to that.
That's what we're
So the
working on with the
10-year plan.
FAA. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other?
Something that came up after our last meeting, workshop, it was very interesting to me. How about the possibility where those new gates are coming up, on the other side, possibly introducing a restaurant?
I think there's a good amount of opportunity here. A lot of this is placeholder, but, you know, we place-held this with concession.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this gives us a generally good feeling for how the numbers that we cranked out would potentially play out, so that we could do cost estimating and just understand the program better. Going downstairs, there is also need at the Customs and Border Patrol area. What you see on the left is the existing floor plan, and this is a scenario that really upgrades the quantity of space and the processing that they need. For example, just the queuing. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but when you come down the ramps, it's very crowded right now at 1,600. That really should be over double that size. The layout of the podiums isn't ideal for Customs and Border Patrol. One of the biggest deficits is actually the bag claim device. So you got too many people crowded around, not enough belt for the number of bags coming out. So increased baggage belt. And then there were visibility issues. So again, this is highly conceptual, but it shows the level of impact you probably have to have at this level to have a really well-functioning customs facility. And I think I'll just back up. Of course, where this expands out, above is where you need that space with the checkpoint and access to the concourse. So this is not something you would kind of do isolated, separate from other work elsewhere.
Chairman, I just wanted to point out, or Eric, that with expansion of the Northwest Concourse, it would result in the International Arrivals General Aviation Apron, right?
Yes, we currently have it in the design, in the budget for design of that, currently with the land acquisition that we're working on along 10th Street.
Okay. So we've mentioned the workshops. A lot of the product that you've seen right now was a result of cranking the math, doing the diagrams, reviewing it, and then we had our workshops, which has to do more with aspirations. While we're doing the math, also engage and understand what the aspirations are for the airport, for quality of service, the type of service, the message that the airport wants to convey to the community. And yeah, so we had 3 workshops between May and July. And as Jeremy mentioned, it was a good representation from the community. And the idea was to identify and document authentic messages, character and aspirations of the region of McAllen to guide future design development and strategy to do that. So sometimes, or frequently, or almost always, these types of projects get rolled out in iterative, stages over time. And so it's helpful to have not just the master plan blocking diagram of how this all works, but some of the ideas that need to be carried forward in each project. So it's cohesive and it ends up with an authentic and impactful message. So that's what this was did. I'm not going to go through all the detail of it, but we talked about the region we serve. We went through narrative and word exercises. We went through imagery. And ultimately, through all of that, came up with conceptual categories, documented them. We did a story space, which isn't the end-all. We're not copywriters, but kind of got at the essence of everything that was said. In this instance, we are McAllen, a community steeped in multicultural heritage with an eye to the future. We celebrate together, guests are welcome, and when you're invited into our home, you are family. Our indelible natural environment plays host to animals and birds that know no border and is overlaid with the pulsing daily life formed by a culture from the entire valley. We are charting our leadership in the region through education, healthcare, commerce, and burgeoning industries while keeping our diverse culture and history close to heart. We are McAllen, we are home. So hopefully, when this project rolls forward, you're able to take the math-based, science-based, this is what you need to do, able to take this groundwork that was laid, and you're ready to commence with design that has meaning and meets your goals. Conceptual mood boards are put together to kind of document, again, the feedback that we received. But again, that's kind of getting, that's starting to lead into design, and design, we're not quite there yet, right? That's your next step. But we were asked, I mentioned earlier, that there's an opportunity in all of this to invest, to make a greater statement when this work transpires. And so we did just do a conceptual what-if exercise looking at, in particular, that area that I call the terminal commons. So when you see this layout of the new here, the dashed line is the existing terminal, and we're gonna focus on that front. You don't, you need to expand a little bit in any case to make it function, but you can take it a couple steps further. If you look at that existing area, and just for your reference, this is the entry right now, and the security checkpoint's right here, ticketing's over here, rental cars are over here. What you see is that even though that's a tall space, there's a lot of solid surface wall all along that front, right here. And there's a lot of structure that comes down fairly low. This is a cross section through there. The height up to the top of the roof is quite tall, but there's a lot of structure and arches, et cetera, that kind of reduce the perception of that. And this front part, even though it ultimately is quite tall, it slopes down and it also has that structure. I'll speed up here, but you may be getting the point. But the idea is in this area, you can do a little bit more while you're restructuring and rebuilding that. So this isn't design, it's just kind of an idea that that's where you can try to create more volume, create more space and width for passengers, a meter greeter area, really make it a place, as opposed to just a transitional corridor. So at the front, we're talking really about this kind of central area right here. Not design, just a what if. The potential that, and it's a little washed out on the screen. You might want to look at the monitors on either side. You can see there's the opportunity to lift the ceiling up in that area, to introduce color, branding from the region, create comfortable areas for your passengers in that area. And perhaps create a focal point, whether it's interpretive or art, there's a place for something like that. So just for orientation's sake, this is like your back is to the entry and you're looking out towards the new checkpoint basically. Taken from a different view, this is over by the rental car areas, and again, I would probably look at the ones on the wall there, the monitors there. Being able to open that up, cafe, concessions, meter greeter area, just a more inviting, memorable space. So that's what we've got in terms of imagery. We do have costs too. But they're rough order of magnitude. So all in, if we're talking about doing really the full vision, the concourse, assumed all at once, it potentially could be around $176 million in today's dollars. There are options, not doing as grand a gesture at the front. Max probably $8 million out of that. If you cleave off some of the support areas, that removes a little bit more, but still, at this point, we're essentially calling it a $165 to $175 million project. Other things, such as how you phase it, impact that. If you do a portion now and wait 3 years and there's escalation, it'll modify that too.
I was going to add that includes a renovation of about 33,000 square feet and an additional 73,000 square feet with the 4 gates. So just to put it in perspective.
Does that include the parking?
I'm sorry?
Does that include any parking?
No, sir, just the airside ramp.
And how would you, or when would you know if the federal government would accept these type of figures and for us to prepare for our percentage?
We're working on them with the forecasting plan, which was presented at the very beginning of it. They will look at that forecasting plan and approve it, and so that's where it's going to draw the line on where our growth is going to happen, and that will justify the funding, that it's eligible. And so then we'll work towards being as aggressive as we can with all the federal grant programs that are available.
For our repayment plan of, if internally we have some money and some bond money or some whatever, and we would see what revenues would be coming in to pay for that for that expense.
Yes, sir.
And this would take us to approximately when in our future?
2038.
2038.
It's not that long.
There is,
Any other questions before we?
but it shows the growth. It shows that sometimes when you want growth, you know, you've got to project expenditures for it.
So would we approve plans prior to or after we hear from the federal government about their allotment of money or approval of this project?
So the request is going to be from the commission to get authorization to move forward with this plan, then work on our funding plan to bring that back. But we also want to ask to go out to do a request for qualifications for the design. Because we don't necessarily need to do the design right now, depending on how the funding plan works itself out and how you all determine it looks like. But it saves us some time because we'll be, through that process is going to take a while. And so we kind of work that concurrently. It'll be some time savings for us.
How long would plans take, like, whole process?
Typically about 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
And I'm just kind of gauging that. It just depends on how we procure the project as well. Doing a CMAR type of procurement of this type of project. We'd want to get the contractor in at the beginning of the project to really help through the design so we can really, tie down some of these numbers and make them more real.
Roy, is this type of project suitable for a contractor at risk?
That's exactly what he
Okay.
just suggested, yes, sir.
What is the 17 million airside civil?
That's all the ramp work, the apron that needs to get expanded to the west.
Thank you.
And you did have workshops and the stakeholders, and you had your current board, advisory board, review and see, and we'll continue to look at what decisions that we need to make.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We presented to the advisory board at the last meeting where we were with respect to the stakeholders meetings, to our full advisory board as well. And the last stakeholders meeting, we requested authorization to bring it before the full commission.
We would want that to continue.
Did this study take into account the land side, like the parking and all that?
We're about to jump into that one, yes, sir.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to cover real briefly some of the work that was done around the land side parking expansion opportunities. So this slide here just shows your existing parking locations. As you're probably aware, there's different areas of parking allocated for different uses, be it rental car, short-term, long-term. So these are all existing parking areas, and you have just under 1,600 current spaces. As many of you know, frequently the short-term and long-term lots are at or above capacity, and there is a very real need for additional parking here in the near term. So we did evaluate opportunities for increased parking. The blue areas that you can see on the image there are areas that can be implemented here in the near term that are, essentially those easier to implement areas. So we can get close to 300 spaces with these additional blue areas that could be implemented here in the near term, and you can see some rough order of magnitude costs for each of the areas. We have 3 separate blue areas. They don't all have to be implemented concurrently. You could move forward with one of them or all of them. They're kind of there as options. But again, you have opportunities for around 300 spaces here in the near term, and those lots could be used for various functions depending on priorities and how parking areas are allocated.
And just to add to that, as Mr. Rodriguez pointed out during the budget hearings, we are working on doing a revision to the rate structure of the parking lot to hopefully that'll give us some short-term relief instead of having to put down pavement.
And then longer term, you can see the orange areas that are shown. These are longer-term opportunities that we know are going to take additional investment or kind of other dominoes that need to fall first. So Area D, which is the one to the right on the screen, this is the current GSA property. So if there ever were an opportunity to acquire that property, there's significant spaces there, roughly around 650 that could be placed there. And then, although a more costly improvement, you could explore a vertical parking structure in your existing lot space that, depending on how many levels you opted to construct, there is significant parking opportunity in your existing lot with a ramp structure. So those are longer term, higher costs, but also are things that we can, continue to plan for and, monitor the need for those parking spaces longer term.
Do you have an estimate on the parking structure for 1,500 spaces?
The parking structures, they're running about 40,000 a space. So we didn't put an estimate in here because it's not something we would recommend to move on right now. It's just an option out there, just because we are a little geographically challenged.
So I'll turn it over to Jeremy to talk about other next steps or any other questions.
Thank you. So just to recap, the request would be from the commission just to get a consensus from everybody to move forward to the next step, which would put together our funding plan, which we bring back to the commission for review. And then we are also requesting for authorization to proceed with a request for qualifications for the design of this layout.
Yeah. Favorable?
Yep.
Good.
Good stuff.
I'm fine.
Thank you.
Continue to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay, so item number 5, I think we're going to skip for now.
Yeah.
Which is
Do we have any
executive session.
public comment?
I don't believe so.
No? Okay.
So we'll adjourn the workshop
Yes, sir.
and move on to the regular meeting at 5.
This concludes the workshop of the McAllen City Commission. Workshops are held every second and fourth Monday of the month, convening at 4 p.m. at the McAllen City Commission chamber on the 3rd floor at McAllen City Hall.